Hey bro, what's going on? I've got a deep, long-form breakdown for you on the latest mini patch, the one labeled version 1.04.102, and I'm going to walk you through everything that matters in a way that sounds like I'm sitting next to you and we're trading takes after a long session. So first up, yes, this was a small quality of life style drop that rolled out across platforms, and if you notice the tiny download pop-up, that's probably what you just grabbed. The patch itself is framed as a mini QoL and stability update, aiming to tidy up the rough edges left after the big Into the Unjust overhaul and the subsequent larger follow-up that already pushed a bunch of fixes and balance tweaks. Let me be honest up front, this patch isn't about adding new content or shaking up the meta. It's a surgical set of fixes, the kind of work that doesn't grab headlines but makes the game feel more consistent and less like it wants to throw you out of the match at random. The devs have been doing a lot of big-scale changes recently. The Into the Unjust expansion fundamentally changed mission geometry and enemy behavior, and that created a cascade of stability and balance issues that needed addressing. The studio's main public patch for the expansion already tried to set a new baseline, and these micro-updates are the follow-through that smooth out the cracks. Now, let's break down the kinds of things you'll hear me calling out in the script you'll read on camera. First, crashes and performance tweaks. The most visible and immediate effect for players is fewer random disconnects, fewer freezes when you're in cave missions, and less chance of a hard crash during heavy enemy spawns. That's a big deal because the cave systems introduced by the expansion have a lot of dynamic geometry and audio lighting load, and those systems have historically been the places where framerate dips and memory pressure lead to instability. This mini patch specifically targeted optimization hotspots and a handful of crash triggers tied to those complex missions scenes. So you should notice missions that used to hiccup now running with fewer surprises. Second, there's a batch of fixes that are painful to the developers but invisible to people who only look at patch notes. Edge case host migration problems, party UI desyncs, and inventory armory menu crashes. These are the sorts of issues where if you're unlucky, you get booted during the endgame or your stratagem wheel refuses to open mid-fight. The micro patch aims to tighten up those workflows, fewer rubber band moments where your squad list shows someone twice, and fewer soft locks when the host disconnects. Those fixes don't make splashy headlines, but they do salvage runs rather than ending them abruptly. Audio and visual fidelity fixes are another big chunk. Players have been vocal about missing weapon SFX in some cave zones and flickering VFX shadows in other spots. The devs leaned into cleaning up those regressions so the world feels coherent again. It's not just cosmetic. Audio cues in this title are gameplay signals. If a stratagem or enemy sound doesn't play, that's a lost reaction window for the squad. The update patches up those holes so your ears aren't lying to you when the subterranean nasties are moving. There were also usability fixes, small but mighty. Things like chat typing animations and some menu interactions were corrected so that when players type or reorganize loadouts, the UI behaves predictably. Again, these feel minor until you've had a match where emotes snap torsos funny, or the armory freezes when multiple players try to manage ship acquisitions at once. The micro patch addresses a handful of these annoying behaviors. The cumulative effect of these little fixes is that the whole play loop feels smoother, and that's really what these hot fixes are about. On the enemy imbalance front, remember that the game recently had its contentious additions. New subterranean terminid variants that could move through tunnels and ambush you, and the rupture strain that players complained about for its unfair timing and brutally precise attacks. The larger follow-up already adjusted those deeper issues, nerfing some of the oversized behaviors and reworking resurfacing logic so these fighters don't behave like teleporting assassins without counters. The mini update doesn't introduce further sweeping balance changes, but it does include targeted adjustments. Think attack hitbox refinements, forced resurfacing windows being more reliable, and attack accuracy tweaks in scenarios where enemies had previously felt spiky and unfun. Those smaller corrections make fights feel more tactical rather than arbitrary. Let's get tactical and imagine the kinds of specific bugs that actually got squashed, because that's what your viewers want to hear in a long-form video. First, cave mission spawn timing was adjusted so that objectives and enemy waves don't overlap in impossible ways. In practice, this means fewer missions where the objective is under an overhang you can't reach because the level spawned wrong, which used to force aborts or frantic cheesing. Second, stratagem behavior in open roof cave areas was refined. There were cases where calling in support would either fail or behave inconsistently. Now those calls are more reliable, reducing awkward moments where needed reinforcement simply vanishes. Third, status effect visual bugs got love. There were reports of effects like adreno defibrillator not applying correctly inside certain vehicles. Fixes aim to resync status application with the underlying mechanics, so what you see is what's actually happening to your character. Beyond that, The update includes a smattering of fixes to enemy AI behaviors in specific mission contexts. Things like reducing the frequency of blind teleporting burrow attacks, ensuring certain worm-like creatures don't path into unreachable geometry where they get stuck and cause the mission to stall, and refining turret targeting logic so defensive emplacements are actually useful instead of being ignored by the AI. Those are the kinds of invisible plumbing fixes that prevent a mission from descending into a bugged mess and keep the emergent challenge intact. I also want to call out the platform nuance. Small builds like this sometimes land at slightly different times across stores due to certification. So on some platforms, you might have seen the patch a few hours before other people. The visible content is the same, but the rollout rhythm can feel staggered, which leads to the community seeing slightly different build numbers for a short period. That's normal for micro patches and explains why players occasionally report versions that don't match the public-facing changelog immediately. It's a boring detail, but it explains confusion in the first 24 hours after an update. Now let's talk about practical player experience. If you were getting kicked from matches because the host migration code was flaky, your runs should be less likely to end with a CTD or a disconnect. If you were hearing nothing, where you expected a loud cue, grenades, stratagems, the tensing hiss of an ambush, you should get those cues back so you can react. If stratagems used to fail in half-covered cave openings, those should now land more reliably. If the squad, UI, or armory crashed when multiple players tried to do stuff at once, that should be improved so you can manage ship upgrades without drama. None of these are glamorous, but they are the nuts and bolts that make an hour of game time not feel like a gamble. There's also the psychological effect to mention. Little patches like this are a signal. They mean the team is actively triaging community pain points rather than leaving them to fester. That builds trust, even if it's slow. The devs have been transparent about prioritizing stability after big content drops, and this micro patch is the sort of focused maintenance you see when a studio listens. Small, iterative fixes that compound into a far better play experience over time. If you watch the dev discourse, that's the narrative they've been pushing. Stabilize, then polish. Okay, for the video, you'll want to keep your tone equal parts straight shooter and entertained. Start by calling out that this patch is small but important, then walk through the pillars. Crash fixes and optimization, UI and menu stability, audio VFX corrections, and targeted enemy or AI fixes. Use concrete examples, no more mid-cave CTDs during the last objective, or stratagems that refuse to land on partially roofed maps should now deploy correctly. Those lines land because they describe experiences every player has had. Sprinkle in the historical context. The big expansion reworked caves and enemy systems, which created the need for these follow-ups, and you've given the audience both what changed and why it mattered. If you want flavor in your narration, add little anecdotes. Describe a mission where the squad nearly completed the objective only to be wrecked by a sudden host migration crash. Then note how that exact scenario is the target of this patch. Talk about the relief of hearing the right audio cue just in time to throw a grenade, or the tiny victory of your stratagem finally landing where you called it. Those moments are relatable and transform technical notes into lived experiences. Keep the language colloquial and keep pacing steady. Long paragraphs with a narrative beat work better than a flat read of bullet points because you asked for a flowing conversational delivery. Finally, balance your praise with realism. This isn't a miracle fix for every issue introduced by the expansion.